This is the book of Tawhid Al-Mufaddal bin Omar, dictated by Imam Jaafar Al-Sadiq. It contains a lot of evidence that points to the opinion that you need. A wise and rational person looks at it with an open mind and an open heart, before you look, so that man will not be deceived by the sayings of atheists and skeptics. Introduction. Part 1. In the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Beneficent. Intend they to put out the light of Allah with their mouths. But Allah will perfect His light, though averse may be the disbelievers. Quran 61:8. There has always existed a tough tug of war between the devilish forces of darkness and ignorance on the one hand, tending to disrupt harmony on the earth, and the forces of peace and order flowing from the sources of light and knowledge on the other. We do not have to go very far to seek out the reason. Man, according to his constitution, is very loath to submit to the discipline of controlled behavior unless rightly guided by enlightened personalities through precepts and personal examples or forced by some external agonies. The libidinal urges within the human psyche, necessary for human survival when allowed to play within the limits, labor mostly towards extreme limits, causing friction within the same human breast by the interplay of mutually contradictory emotions on the one hand and disorderly social conduct on the other, due to the competitive rivalries of different individuals and groups yearning to secure the same material goods. The Western philosopher Spinoza has very tersely summed up the situation of humans in his memorable words: "Human beings are like hedgehogs gathered together for warmth. They would shiver to death if they tried the aloofness of Robinson Crusoe, but they would puncture each other as skins if they came too close together. Each individual's wants of shelter, food, etc., must be satisfied as an essential part of fulfilling his purpose in life, which may be defined, for want of a better terminology, as co-partnership in humanity's orderly progress to live blissfully in the world as well as in the hereafter. Man alone is the stumbling block in the way of this achievement because of his denial to be guided by the enlightened personages, the prophets and those in their wake, and because of his mad rush towards satisfying his desires, which, however, as has been said, cannot be satisfied regardless of the efforts made for satisfaction. If society is to be saved from their barbaric conflicts and consequent degeneration to the beastly life of the jungle, checks and limits have to be devised and imposed on the hellish play of the desires. The question arises as to who shall impose the checks. Different answers have been given to this question, but the one answer that has repeatedly worked to man's everlasting benefit is the one that has been expounded from all angles by the truly enlightened Imam Jaafar Al-Sadiq, A.S. The discreet reader will find in the pages that follow a veritable mine of information covering almost all aspects of human knowledge. He shall find that most of the information for which the West gets credit was transmitted thereto from the fountainhead of our great thinkers, among whom the most eminent is Imam Jaafar Al-Sadiq, A.S., whose teachings are recorded in many collections of apostolic narrations, particularly in Bihar al-Anwar. A vast encyclopedia of learning in no less than 27 volumes. 1. Imam Al-Sadiq, A.S., lectured in Medina to thousands of scholars who flocked to this center of learning from all parts of the known world. They carried away to the far-flung provinces of the Muslim Empire the light of original thought and research. It was the torch lit ablaze by Imam Al-Sadiq, A.S., in Medina that set his devout scholars on the path of inquiry and research. It was by this nucleus that the four corners of the known world received their awakening to the resplendent vistas of the various branches of knowledge. It should be remembered that all this was being achieved not because of any encouragement from the state but rather against the teeth of opposition characteristic of despotic regimes. A very important aspect of this dissemination of learning, which runs as a soul-stirring strain throughout the system of education that was inaugurated by Imam Al-Sadiq, A.S., is the insistence and emphasis on the ideology of Islam and its fundamental tenet Tawhid, oneness of God. Imam As-Sadiq, A.S., himself, infused as he was with the crystalline purity of the ideology, infused that same galvanizing spirit into his following. They, in turn, became the torch-bearers of the light of learning in distant lands, notably the southern gateway of Europe, Andalusia. They were the people who wrote one of the brightest chapters in the intellectual history of medieval Europe. They were the main bearers of the torch of the culture, science and philosophy which made possible the Renaissance of learning in Western Europe. Cordova, Seville, Granada, and Toledo, to name only a few of the centers of Muslim Spain, opened their gates to the teeming alumni who were seeking admission to the universities. See Philip K. Hidy's History of the Arabs pages 557 to 605 for Muslim contribution in the cause of intellectual upsurge. It is on this account that Stanley Lane Poole in his History of the Moors in Spain mourns the fall of the Muslim Empire of Spain in these words: "The fall of Granada happened within 40 years of the conquest of Constantinople, but the gain to Islam in the East made no amends for the loss to Europe in the West. The Turks were incapable of founding a second Cordova." Dozy, by no means a friend of Islam, is nevertheless compelled to pay a glowing tribute to the administrative, cultural, and, in particular, intellectual caliber of the Muslims. Such was the influence exerted by these votaries of the Mennonite school of learning that despite the secularization of the state by the rulers, their zeal was transmitted to the coming generations through the various centers that sprang up. Even Christian monarchs solicited their cooperation in their day-to-day administration. Thus, the Sicilian King Roger's administrations, both civil and military, were mainly staffed by Muslim intellectuals, who gave the court an Oriental complexion. Philip K. Hidy attributes the prosperity enjoyed by his realm to the intellectual caliber of the Muslim staff. They not only administered his kingdom efficiently but also manipulated his susceptibilities. As to imbue him with a Muslim view of Christianity, the chief gem of his court was illiteracy, geographer and cartographer at Palermo. It will thus be obvious to even a superficial observer that the torch lit ablaze by Imam Jaafar Al-Sadiq, A.S., at Medina was the powerful lighthouse that illuminated the intellectual firmament of not only his own age but also the ages that followed. His own powers of observation are marvelous to the extreme, as will be seen from a perusal of his works on the varied branches of learning, which, of course, always converge to the central theme of Tawhid. To cite only a few instances of his intuitive grasp of the nature of things, we may observe his ultramodern, scientific description of the development of the human embryo through its various stages till its flowering into maturity, with special emphasis at each descriptive pause to focus the mind on the specific merit of ingenuity evinced therein. The embryo in the world is adjusted, though it is confined within three distinct kinds of coverings: the outer wall, the womb and the placenta. This is the time when the embryo can neither manage his nutrition nor ward off any harm from itself. The menstrual flow is diverted to serve him nutrients, just as water carries nutrients to the plants, so this process goes on till such time as his constitution is perfected, his skin over his body becomes tough enough to withstand the atmosphere, and his eyes gain the capacity to withstand light. When all this is accomplished, its mother feels labor pangs, which shake her severely, culminating in the birth of the infant. With the birth of the infant, the menstrual flow is diverted to its mother's breasts. Its taste is altered, so is its color. It becomes a nutriment of the first order. Till such time as his body remains delicate, his organs and bowels soft and weak. As he begins to move about and requires tougher nutriment to build up a stronger constitution, his molars appear to masticate food to facilitate digestion. He carries on with such nutriment till puberty. Who then created man from nothingness and who becomes the architect of his worth? Who is ever vigilant to supply his needs from time to time? If abiogenesis, spontaneous creation without specific design, can be admitted under such conditions of regularity, then purposeful generation and definitely balanced order in creation will have to be admitted to proceed from error and disorder.